Trump administration is coming in and trying to whitewash history and, remove references to his racial motivations. Now, in terms of the specifics of what happened, there were some edits to some materials. Then there was confusion about what was really going on. But as I've been previously saying, this fits a larger pattern of intentional actions by the administration to downplay racism, racial terror, and slavery at national parks.
Alrighty, welcome back. It's Alabama Politics This Week. Josh Moon, David Person, and we are happy now to have with us Seth Levi from Southern Poverty Law Center, the Chief Strategy Officer at the Southern Poverty Law Center. And I have to tell you, of all the people that we've had on from the Southern Poverty Law Center, and I thank them every show for the support they give us and for just the work that you do. Your title is probably the one I would most covet. I got to tell you. It seems like Chief Strategy Officer at the Southern Poverty Law Center seems like something that I didn't know that I wanted as a child, but that I should have. Is it as good as it sounds?
Such a cool title. That is a cool title. Yeah.
Well, Josh, thanks. I appreciate the flattery there. But I'm sure as a child, you probably dreamed of bigger things than Chief Strategy Officer at Southern Poverty Law.
I can't imagine that whatever I dreamed of would have been more important with the work that y'all do and the people you've helped and things like that. I mean, seriously, to think that you were the chief strategy person for doing a lot of the stuff that the Southern Poverty Law Center has done over the years. I mean, that's got to be a very fulfilling thing every day. That's all. And that's what I meant by it. And it just seems like it. I mean, because really, I think y'all do fantastic work. You've done such good work for so long, and so anyways, enough flattery. I know you're here already. I'm not trying to lure you in. So, but we wanted to get you on and talk about what's going on with the Trump administration. And it's in one specific area to start with, and then we'll broaden it out from there. But there have been some changes made to a national parks monument in Mississippi related to the death or the murder of Medgar Evers, civil rights activist Medgar Evers, who was killed. Anybody who's seen the movie, Mississippi Burning, just a fantastic civil rights movie with Gene Hackman was in that, right? Was that the Gene Hackman one, or was it? No, I'm conflating two different ones. That was Alec Baldwin, right? It was Alec Baldwin, and Byron D. LeBeckwith was played by James Woods. And yeah. So anyways, so now we've gone down a whole other rabbit hole. But so what has happened in Mississippi with the monument? What are they doing?
Well, I'm going to step back for a second. Day one of this administration, they launched a campaign to whitewash American history, whitewash the history of racism, of slavery, of racial terror in America. We saw this at the very start of the administration when they began undoing military bases that had previously been named after Confederates, and then they were changed under the Biden administration, and then the Trump administration went and changed them back. They did a whole review of storytelling and history related to the armed forces, targeting, stories that were about Black servicemen like the Tuskegee Airmen. And now we've seen them, as the months move forward, also doing a review of, cultural institutions, of the exhibits in them. We saw this early on with the Smithsonian. And so now getting up to present day, we're seeing changes made at national park sites across the nation that have to do with racism, with Jim Crow, with slavery, with racial discrimination. And so, getting right up to today, the latest is altering language at the Medgar Evers home that's related to his murder, downplaying and even removing references to racism when describing his murderer, Beckwith, who was a Klansman and a self-described racist. This was somebody who said that it was the right of white people to run the South. And like, that's the history. This is who this person is. This is what his motivation was. And this was, one instance of many instances of racial terror during the Jim Crow era. But again, as I was saying, the Trump administration is coming in and trying to whitewash history and, remove references to his racial motivations. Now, in terms of like the specifics of what happened, there were some edits to some materials. Then there was confusion about what was really going on. But as I've been previously saying, this fits a larger pattern of intentional actions by the administration to downplay racism, racial terror, and slavery at national parks.
Yeah, they did. They took away. I read the reporting, watched several videos of reporting from Mississippi Today, which is a great outlet, by the way. Mississippi Today, if anybody is looking for more information on this, they removed the word racist. And specifically from there, they removed a couple of references to the KKK, and tried to remove the fact that this was a racially motivated murder, out of from the history. I don't. It seems so petty. I mean, at this point, we have seen the movies. We all are fairly familiar, at least, we all are. And I think people of a certain age are. And I think most kids, most textbooks even, teach these things at this point. What do they feel like, or what do you think that the goal is here? What are they trying to accomplish by doing this?
Well, I think it definitely goes above and beyond petty. That might be how it seems at first glance, and I understand why you said that, but I think their intentions run much deeper than that. This is an administration that, is extremely hostile to concepts like DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, and concepts like systemic racism. And these concepts and DEI, they are really all about educating us how the history of America, the racial history, the racism, we are still living today with the repercussions of these actions, of these events, of what happened in the past. And we have a responsibility to right those wrongs. And it also helps us understand what's going on today. An example of that is if you look at, why is it that people of color have less wealth than white people? Well, that stretches back to hundreds of years of discrimination, exploitation. You look at things like home ownership that's linked to things like redlining. So bringing this back to the administration's goals, if things like Jim Crow never happened, if slavery never happened, right, hundreds of years of discrimination, exploitation never happened, then, that becomes then less of a reason why today we need to be more intentional about looking at issues like poverty, for example, through a, systemic racial lens and understanding how the past impacts the future. And, why it is that we should actually be a little intentional about, viewing our problem solving through a racial lens. That's what they want to do away with. And to do away with that, you have to erase the history. And that's what's going on.
Yeah, I would even say, and that's great analysis, Seth. But I would even add to it this. This is about acculturating the generation of children that is being born right now, and perhaps even some who are, say, under 10 or 12, and then about acculturating future generations. This is about trying to establish a premise for the validity of white supremacy. Do you agree with that or disagree?
Oh, that is absolutely 100% correct, or as the president likes to say, 800% correct. We recognize, not recognize, the administration recognizes that the National Park Service, the Smithsonian are vital places where all Americans learn about our history, and especially children. I'm sure we all have memories of when we were school-age kids going to a national park or a Smithsonian exhibit. That's where we learn our history. And exactly, David, to your point, when people go through these institutions, they want to provide them a distorted, fake view of history. And, it's kind of then no surprise that, we see public polling that shows that a large number of white people believe discrimination against them is a bigger problem than discrimination against people of color. You see incredible polling that shows anything like 30 or 40% of Americans believe that the Civil War was fought over states' rights and not slavery. And exactly to your point, as we whitewash the history of these institutions that teach us history and also attack lesson plans that are taught in schools, people are going to go through life now with incorrect facts and being ignorant, and then having a white supremacist, worldview take hold in their mind.
Right, and I would hasten to add, this isn't just about young white children. This is about all children. I've told this story before on this podcast about how my first wife used to teach in the Decatur City school system. This was back in the mid 90s, and in those days in the Decatur City school system, it was customary for the Daughters of the Confederacy to come into classrooms on selected days to talk to the children and to promote their agenda. And my ex-wife came home one day furious because she said that this Daughter of the Confederacy had come into her class and had said to the black children, you should be glad that there was slavery, because not only did it rescue you from the savagery, quote unquote, of Africa, which is of course, which I would add parenthetically, is not only a very historically ignorant and culturally ignorant statement to make. It's not even factual, or there's just so much wrong with that statement. But it also of course perpetuates some lies and so forth. But in addition to that, she said, and what it did was it introduced Christianity to you. Now, this is also a factual lie, a historical inaccuracy. So what I'm suggesting, Seth, is that white children and black children, there are attempts being made to indoctrinate, acculturate all children, so that all children will be more amenable to white supremacy and its false evil agenda.
Well, no disagreement from me that it's completely right. And the last thing I'll add on, there's actually even like an international aspect to this, because we see international tourists love visiting our national parks, as well as the Smithsonian institutions, and to learn about our history. And, now they're going to get pulled into this too.
Yeah. So let me ask you one other question here, Seth. In light of this overt attack on institutions that seek to push back against white supremacy and that try to protect the history that is true and complete, what do we do to make sure that the Southern Poverty Law Center, the Equal Justice Initiative, the Rosa Parks Museum, and all of these other historical entities, not just in Montgomery, but even in Birmingham and Huntsville and other places, how do we protect them from this overt attack?
I'd say the simplest way, and in some ways maybe the most effective way, is people need to speak out and voice their outrage. when the administration has gotten away with changing a lot, but they've also, there have been moments where they've been sort of frozen in their tracks because of public outrage. This is not a moment for anybody to sit back and not exercise their First Amendment rights, saying this is wrong. And folks have to do that. The second thing is also, putting pressure on their elected officials and holding them accountable, telling them, this is not acceptable. And these are, in fact, issues that we're going to vote on. They, elected officials, too, need to feel the pressure of this. And I'd say 3, it's also just supporting a free press and journalism. As I think Josh mentioned at the beginning of this was Mississippi Today. I agree, a really fantastic outlet that did the work to uncover what was going on and raise important questions. And I do think people are doing, their civic duty and helping to preserve democratic institutions. If you subscribe to a local newspaper, especially a local newspaper, because they're going to be the folks on the ground that have the ability to pay attention to what's going on.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask you one other thing real quick that just popped into my head. It seems to me like the white supremacists that are currently pushing this agenda have made a fundamental miscalculation. I think they assume that the America of 2026 is the same as the America of 1956 or even 1966, where racial lines were much more rigidly drawn in the minds of people. I'm talking about at the grassroots level. Now, over the past, what has it been, 70 years or so, that the civil rights, since the launching of the civil rights movement, approximately 70 years, we have seen a blending of races and families to such a degree that in my assessment, a lot of white people who may at one time have been would have been acculturated to bigotry and to overt expressions of white supremacy, they're not that way anymore, in part because their children have married people of other races, or their grandchildren have. And you see, it's not uncommon today to see a white grandmother walking through a store with an obviously black grandchild and that sort of thing. Do you think there's any validity to that line of thought?
Yeah, I do. I mean, we have changed, for the better as a nation. There's obviously still a huge amount of work we have to do. But I do agree with you that I think the administration does have a fundamental misunderstanding of where the American people are right now in their own journey on these issues. I just think about the past Super Bowl and all of the hand-wringing from the administration over Bad Bunny. And, he's not going to sing in English and all of this. And then at the end of the day, what was it, like 120 some million people watched his show and loved it, despite all the outrage. And then you saw plenty of people who also identified as conservative saying, yeah, it was a great show. I respected it. So, yeah, I think they don't fully understand where people are. And, I think the other thing they don't get is, I believe a lot of Americans, if not a majority of Americans, are okay with the fact that our history, our legacy as Americans is not good, that it is ugly, that a lot of really awful and bad things happened, and that acknowledging them and talking about them isn't actually unpatriotic, that it's a good thing, that it helps us, aspire to be better people. And I think, yeah, the administration doesn't seem to get that, people can be both patriotic about the country we want to be and recognize that we had serious flaws in the past, and that's saying it mildly.
That what you just said there is something that has always kind of befuddled me. And it's this notion of we can never acknowledge these horrible things that happened in the past. This resistance by people today to say, well, no, that didn't happen. I mean, it just it's always confused me to such a degree, because I mean I've got awful people in my family tree in the past, and they don't reflect on me. You know, I mean, they don't reflect on who I am. And so I've always, what drives this sense of, it's almost like they're protecting some legacy or something fragile, this image that they're trying to hold up. But it doesn't make any sense. Isn't to me, the better story is, we did these terrible things, but we learned better and we overcome it. And now we want to do better. So what's the risk that they seem to be fighting of acknowledging these things that happen? I mean, what do they gain from not acknowledging this ugly history and the fact that we've overcome it?
Yeah, well, some of this, it's like, when they talk about how great America is and manifest destiny, there's almost this, or there is this religious aspect to it. And it's like, how can we be a divinely inspired nation that can do no harm if we actually did do all of this harm in the past?
Right. Yeah.
It's like two things can't be true at the same time. And so therefore they just pretend that all that stuff never happened.
Right.
And if I could add something, Josh, I think we're really running into this in our 250th anniversary year with the Declaration of Independence. I'm sure we've already seen from the materials put out by the administration, especially with their, I'm putting in air quote, historical partners, there's not going to be much discussion about how problematic many of the founding fathers were, that many of them were slave owners. At least one of them we know sexually assaulted somebody who they enslaved. We're probably not going to talk about that because, they want to just treat them as saints who did no wrong.
Yeah. We're not going to talk about the fact that after this was all settled and done, that we led a whole effort to round up the slaves that was led by the guy who's owned the dollar bills. Our founding father and first president was, George Washington helped round up slaves and return them back. Those folks who had been promised freedom for fighting for one side or the other, he helped put them back where they were, including at his own plantation. You're right. And it just is. But again, I could go on and on it because it just so irritates me the way people treat this. But the last thing I wanted to get to before I know because you got to run, but what is happening? Is there anything happening along these same lines in Alabama? Because we have a lot of these monuments devoted to civil rights horrors that have taken place in this state as well, and a lot of those things reference racism and acts by the KKK and other things. So are similar acts going to take place here? Are they taking place here?
So I don't know if they've taken place yet, but I think we should expect that they probably will, given everything we're seeing, not just in neighboring states, but even up in Philadelphia at Independence Hall with references to slavery being scrubbed there. So I think we need to have a watchful eye here in Alabama and take a close look at the materials at our national parks and other historic sites.
Okay. Well, it's, I know when, right when the Trump administration started and we had the whole Doge effort, which was so successful, that, there was the threat to close, the bus depot in Montgomery.
Yes.
A national park there on the National Registry. And so, I just, I'm fearful. I know a lot of people who work at a lot of those places, and they're great people and they've done great work and educated a lot of folks. And so hopefully we can, we'll try to write something up and use this and other things to kind of keep a focus on it, and maybe if we shame enough people, we can stave off some of it for a little while. But Seth, man, we really appreciate it. Coming on and doing this, and also the work that you've done and what y'all are doing at the Southern Poverty Law Center to kind of stave off some of the horribleness that we're seeing around. We need y'all. We need you. We need you more now than ever. And so we really do appreciate it.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Josh and David.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thanks, Seth Levi from Southern Poverty Law Center. They do fantastic work. Y'all support them whenever you can, but because it is very worthwhile. All right, we're going to slide out. We'll come back in just a minute and wrap this thing up. It's Alabama Politics This Week. We're back in a minute.